Welcome to All Classic Car, and in this collection we are looking at original photographs of the old side valve Fords, the 8 and the 10 horsepower cars. And to begin with, we have KUU 494. This is a lovely example of the E494A Ford Anglia. This photo was taken in France sometime in the early 1950s. Clearly a picnic stop, and as you'll see in the photographs that are coming up, many picnic stops feature in these photographs of classic Fords of the 50s and before. And here, a photo of Dad and his Ford 100E. This was circa 1970. In fact, that was the car that I came home from hospital in when I was born, so that was the first car I ever travelled in, which may explain quite a lot. But yeah, that's outside our old house. That's my bedroom window on the right hand side of the building in the background. And another example of the Ford 100E, this time the 4-door 100E Prefect. Some great old signs in the background there as well. What a great old photograph that is. Next up in this collection of Ford side valve photographs, we have a side-on view of a slightly modified Ford 103E Popular. Various modifications: the white painted wheels, a chrome plated headlamp, buckets there, a roof rack and so on, little flashing indicators fitted on the B-pillar just behind the door handle there. Quite a few modifications on this old pop. Now to the Ford Prefect, the E493A, and again a picnic setting somewhere. I'm not quite sure where we are in this particular scene. We've got the Prefect in the middle there, there's a little MG Y-Series saloon on the left, and an Austin 7 Ruby to the right, and a Rover P4 just behind that. Now, first of several van photographs, LRE 431, a little 1000 Ford van, a Fordson van, the E83W, quite a nice one. That's a 1944 registration. You can just see the commercial operator's disc in the windscreen there next to the tax disc. So this would have been built during the Second World War when vehicles were in very short supply. Okay, thanks to Steve for this photo. Here's his dad with ALE 585. This is a short rad Ford Model Y, dating to about 1933. The early Model Ys had that shorter radiator. The later cars, as we'll see in a short while, have a longer radiator that needed a dip in the front bumper. Okay, thanks to Peter now for this and other New Zealand photographs that will appear in this collection. Here we've got a lineup of classic Fords on the right hand side, an E04A Anglia. Behind that an E93A Prefect, an E493A Prefect, and an E494A Anglia once again. So a great lineup of Fords, and a colour photograph here of another Ford 100E Anglia. 3-bar grille on this particular photo. But yeah, that looks like a very original car. We've got an AA badge on the front and AN other. I'm not quite sure what the other one is. What a great old photo, and a pop just on the left hand side there, a 103E. Here's another photograph of the same car, 100E Anglia of the 1950s. These are the 1172cc side valve engine, just like the upright pop did, but it was a very different engine inside. Based on the earlier engine, same capacity, but a different animal really. Okay, next up, Dad 579. We've got 4 photographs of this one. This car dates to 1938. This is a Ford 7W, a Mark II version of the Ford 7W. What a great old photo that is. Bit of damage on the front of the grille there below the RAC badge, and that shows the dip in the front bumper to enable the starting handle to fit. And here's a couple of lads inside the same Ford. It looks like the semaphore indicator's missing, and you've got the aperture there on the top of the B-pillar, but nothing appears to be inside. And you can see the very different dashboard compared to the later Ford Pop 103Es and so on. But yeah, what a bit of fun that looks like. Is that his dad's jacket there? And here we've got Dad 579, a rear view of it, the 7W. You can see the back end is very similar to that of the Ford Prefect, but very different hinges. The Prefect didn't have big shiny hinges like that. They had painted hinges just in the corner of the boot lid. Another photograph of Dad 579. The location of this is Broadway, and if you actually have a look at the main high street in Broadway, you will see the buildings in the background there. Very similar even to this day. The canopy is still there. Sadly the fuel pumps have gone. We've got petrol pumps there for Shell, Power, BP and National Benzol. Now, thanks to Peter again for this photograph. This was in London in the early 1980s. We've got XYW612. That's circa 1959 Ford 100E. It still shows as being taxed. It has been modified a little bit. There are photos online if you go on Google put that registration number into Google and you'll see the photos there. Okay, another one of Peter's photos here. This is Peter's Uncle Bill, circa 1960, and his two-door Ford Model Y, a pre-war Ford 8, the 8 horsepower saloon. Oh, here's an interesting one. We've got a slightly modified special bodied Ford here. I'm not quite sure what we're looking at here, but clearly it's got like a woody estate car conversion. Front wings are looking a bit sad in that case, but yeah, wedding bells and a lucky horseshoe. Another photograph here, and here it looks like a 7Y, the 8 horsepower 7Y. These were built from 1937 to 1939. Looks like we've got a bit of a tyre change. You can just see that there is a jack under there. You can see the little winding handle just near to that gentleman who's crouching down. And to much more recent times of the late 1950s, I'm guessing, we've got a Ford Thames 300E van here. Yeah, I wonder where this was. Another Ford Model Y, but this time a four-door saloon version. Seems to be far fewer of those in these old photos compared to the two-door cars. A young lady at the wheel, perhaps she was learning to drive in this little car, who knows. And you can see one of those little marker things on the front wing there. Over to Horopito Motors in New Zealand, thanks to Peter again for this and the other New Zealand photos, and a very sad looking Ford Model C. These were built 1934 to 35. There is a separate video here on the Old Classic Car channel of photographs taken around this yard in the 1970s, and what an incredible place that is. Now here's a lovely old photograph, thanks to Rob for this one. This was an old family business going back many years. This was in West Kirby on the Wirral, circa 1954. We've got a 500 Fordson van on the right there, and facing it, a lovely little Austin 8 van. What a rarity that is. Now 624 DRL, another example of the Ford popular 103E. And the car alongside, an Austin A40 Devon. If you're a fan of these small side valve Fords, please let me know in the comments. Maybe you've got one now. And there's another photo of 64 DRL, bonnet raised. You can see the starting handle clipped onto the bulkhead there, just close to the chassis plate, which you can see there as well on the right hand side. Wonder where this was. This van belonged to one of Dad's mates in the 1960s. Another example of the E494A. These were built from 1938 all the way through to 1957 with very few changes during its life really. Same 1172cc engine is fitted to the 103E Pop and the Model C. Okay, now we're in South Africa and we have another example of the 4-door 100E Ford Prefect. This one looks like it's been used in a bit of a club competition, judging by the entry number on the front bumper there. And behind it, an E493A Prefect with many badges. AYU 537. Here we have a long-grad Ford Model Y. As I was saying before, these had a taller radiator which required a dip in the front bumper in order for the starting handle to pass through to the front of the engine. Clearly this one's been photographed in a Ford, or a bit of flooded, I'm not quite sure where this was really. There's another photo of the same car. We've got several photographs of this one. It's a really nice little car. This was under Wye Valley, this particular photo was taken. And again, a picnicking scene. And head-on view of the same car here, and a cheeky young lad sat on the bonnet of the prized mid-1930s Ford Model Y. Another photograph of the same Ford, and this time on a camping trip. Got a tent there, everyone enjoying a nice cup of tea, all very civilised. Not much tread on that front tyre, sir. And here we are again, and another picnic stop. Many things going on here. You can see a little stove in the background there with a kettle on top of it, and enjoying a cup of tea. All very civilised indeed. Okay, away from Model Ys, and this I think is a 300E van. A young chap sat on the front of it. Oh, we're back at Horror Petite Motors again, and oh, look at that Ford E83W van. There's an E494A Prefect and so many other cars. Like I said before, this was about 1976, I believe this scene was taken, but in fact, and it still looks pretty similar even to this day. This particular yard still very much in business, supplying parts all over the place. Okay, EWA 381. That is a 1937 to 1939 Sheffield registered Ford 7Y. And indeed there is a Ford Prefect with it, so it dates this photo to no earlier than about 1952 or 53. 947 DLY is next, another of Peter's London roadside snaps, and this car still shows as being registered but on Sawn, and it's a two-door Ford 100E Popular, quite a late example of the Ford 100E. Carrying on this collection now, we're in 1954 in London, and this photograph was one of several taken during a street survey of traffic conditions in the town. And NYE 958 is a 1953 Ford Thames E83W van. Quite a lineup of cars there. Back to Model Ys, an early short rad Ford Model Y, a two-door car, AGY 477. A lady there with a very nice hat, and clearly dressed up for a day out in their venerable little Ford. Back to Pops, 829 BKK, Kent registered Ford Popular 103E. This one dates to about late 57 or early 1958. There's a lovely side-on view of the same 103E. What a great looking car that is. It was based very much on the E494A Anglia that came before, like the one that we had until very recently, although the earlier car had the 8-horse engine, 933cc, whereas the 103E had the 1172cc engine. That's what this car shown here would have had. And this would also have had the same 1172 engine. A special bodied E83W. The photos aren't great, they were tiny, so they didn't scan particularly well, but it's an interesting subject, so I thought I would include them here. But yeah, it's a very interesting body on the back of that one. If you look closely, it's very different to the factory produced vans. Okay, back to saloon cars now, and we have DUR 578, a Ford 7Y. Look at those headlamp lenses, very, very dished on the earlier cars. Later cars are much flatter than that. The Ford 100E Prefect here. You can always tell a Prefect because they had those shiny grills with the vertical slats. PX0141 is the registration number. A gentleman stood with his prized Ford, and in the background a 103E Pop driving towards us. Back to New Zealand, thanks to Peter again, and we've got an E93A Prefect on the right, looking a little dishevelled, and behind it, its replacement, the E493A Ford Prefect, both with the 10 horsepower E93A 1172cc engine. And here we have the estate car version of the Ford 100E. There was the Escort, and this was the Squire with added pieces of wood down the side to differentiate it from the cheaper Escort, and also opening sliding side windows as well. And the four-door Model Y here being loaded onto or off a ferry, it would seem, and just visible at the bottom left there, slightly grander looking car. I wonder what car that was. Oh, it looks a little bit perilous, and there's quite a crowd of onlookers watching the proceedings. The Model Y here, this time a two-door car, well laden. Look at that roof rack full of maybe camping gear, something like that. And look at the size of the luggage rack on the back with a huge box on it. Maybe that's a huge picnic set, it would appear to be. Yeah, certainly well laden, that particular car. Back to New Zealand in the 1970s, and another E493A Prefect in a very vivid two-tone paint scheme. Now, thanks to Steve for these 3 photographs. These were taken in the early 1970s at RAF St Morgan, and we have an engine swap being undertaken on that Prefect there, the 100E Prefect. Looks a little bit knocked around, but this is very typical of the sort of roadside shenanigans that would go on with cars in the 60s and the 1970s. And there's another photograph of the same car on a different occasion. Clearly a lot of work going on underneath the back this time of the old Ford. Another action shot there of the little Ford 1172 engine being lifted in or lifted out. I do like the safety slippers on display there. Another example of E83W now. The registration begins COW, C-O-W, and that tells us it started life in the Southampton area pre-war. 1939 was the year of registration of that particular vehicle. So given that the E83W came out in 38, that's a fairly early example. It looks like it's had extra windows cut into the side. There's another view of the same car, gentleman looking skywards through his binoculars. I wonder what he was looking at, but yeah, a great little van, and it's just leaning a little bit to the passenger side because the engine was offset in these little vans to the off side, or the near side rather. You can see just one starting handle hole on the grille. That's another sign of an early van. There's a rear 3/4 view of it, apparently towing what must have been a very lightweight caravan. This is a bit of an oddball, FEH17. It would appear, I mean that grille is off a 7Y, but they were only available as a 2-door, so I'm guessing this is a 4-door 7W, which at some point has been retrofitted with the 7Y grille. I'm not quite sure what's going on there. Maybe let me know in the comments if you can shed any more light on that one. Really nice little colour shot here from Ireland. We've got a black 100E, and we've got a Morris Minor in front of that, an Austin A40 Mark 1. Just driving alongside the parked 105E Anglia estate. So many different vehicles. In this particular shot just outside the Giblins Hotel. Back to the pre-war Model Y here, and what a great, lovely photograph. Really well posed and taken photograph of a family and their trusted little 8-horse Ford. 933cc was the size of the engine in those particular cars. And there's a rear view, possibly of the same car, I'm not quite sure. But yes, again, it looks like a picnic and sandwich stop for the owners of this little Ford. The bonnet's raised on the near side, so perhaps they're just letting it cool off a little bit. They were quite prone to fuel vaporising, these little side valve Fords. And to the early 1950s Ford Prefect here, we have an Irish registered E494A here. Extra lamps on the front and a very sturdy looking roof rack as well. What do we have here but a Ford Anglia E494A, apparently taking part in some sort of car test, a bit of an auto test or something like that, organised by a motor club somewhere. Has a bit of a feel of an airfield setting, this one. I must admit there are 2 photos of this car, MPW130. That is a Norfolk registered Anglia. There it is leaning. That's a bit of an angle there as it goes around the cones. Great old photograph that. It's got one of those radiator muffs on it as well, partially opened as well, so presumably this was in the winter sometime. Looking at the trees in the background would seem to back that idea up as well. Yeah, looks like a lot of fun. And we have a cycling event here, but of interest to me is the vehicle on the right there. A wonderful little E04C van. These were only made from 1946 to 1948. And yes, Scullion's radio. So were they providing the commentary perhaps? Now, SUV 613. Another example of the 4-door 100E Prefect. Another roadside cup of tea, it would seem, in this particular photograph. I'm thinking we've got a Ford Anglia, judging by the hubcap with the shiny centre. The Ford Pop didn't come as standard. With that there, the Pop 103 just had painted hubcaps, so I'm guessing we're looking at the slightly earlier E494A. Okay, DPE 691, presumably a wartime view of another two-door Ford Model Y. Look at the headlamp mask on the left, and on the right-hand lamp, another form of mask that just allows a very small sliver of light to appear through. This was all part of the blackout regulations during the war. And now here's a rarity, JN 5993, that's a Southend registered car, and this is a Model C Deluxe touring car. A very rare tourer version of the Ford Model C. What a bobby dazzler that is. I really like that. Lovely lines. And very, very rare now. Now, not the best photo in the world, but I thought I'd include it anyway because it's a lovely old car. WLH 763, a two-door Ford 100E with mirror on the front wing, the driver's front wing only, not on the passenger side. So, yeah, perhaps this car was being run on a fairly tight budget. And perhaps the same applies to this E83W. Wow, UMP 706, looking a little bit battered, this one, if I'm honest. Look at the state of that front wing, and no headlamp lens either on the passenger front wing. So, a very, very well worked example, probably not far from the scrapyard. Okay, another 100E here, little 100E Ford Anglia. Still quite a few of these classic Ford photos to come. If you've got any memories of the cars that feature in this particular video, please say hello in the comments. Now this is a weird one. Look at the state of this. A badly crashed Ford Prefect. But even stranger is, why would this lady want to be posed with this bashed up Ford Prefect? Was she in it perhaps, and she's just taking a photo for nostalgia purposes sometime after the event? Who knows? But yeah, that's a very, very sad looking car indeed. Yeah, it just seems a bit of an odd thing to photograph, so maybe the photographer and that lady had some link to this particular car. I guess we'll never know that one, but yeah, certainly hit something fairly solid, this one. The review now of another Ford Prefect. GVX 231 is the registration of this particular car, and that's a fairly early example of the E93A Prefect. Oh, picnic time again, and this would appear to show a Ford 7Y Deluxe. Deluxe because you can just about make out the chrome windscreen surround, which shows us it's got the opening screen, which I think was fixed on the more basic model. And again, you can see those domed headlamp lenses as well. Now, I wonder what was going on here. I don't think we'll ever know, but a Ford Model C or a CX, which looks like it's been stripped down for a bit of sand racing or some sort of jolly japes along those lines. But yeah, yeah, someone's having fun with that one. Oh, another example of Ford Anglia. This, with the very upright grille, is the E494A Ford Anglia. This is a Mark I example. The grille did change ever so slightly. The badging was different on the Mark II version, but this is definitely a Mark I. It's got a radio aerial as well mounted on the A-pillar there. And two Fords for the price of one. Here we've got a 7W on the left and a Model Y on the right. The 7W on the left, it looks very similar body shape to the Pop, but if you look at that rear side window, it's not quite as tall, and it's also opening, whereas on the Anglia and the Pop that came later, it was a fixed window. So that's quite unusual to see an example of one of those with the window partially wound down. And back to Ford Prefect again. Here we go, probably an early 1950s photograph, I would have thought, this one. Whole lineup of classic British cars here, but of interest to us here on the left is 382 JFM, another 100E Ford Prefect. I think this photograph was taken somewhere around Ellesmere Portway, somewhere over there I believe. And the car on the right is a Singer Gazelle. Another example now of the Ford E83W van, or the 10 hundredweight van as it was referred to back then, of the early 1950s. Just appearing in the background there, we have something PJ, maybe GPJ 223, a Ford 7Y Deluxe. Again, a Deluxe with the opening windscreen and various other little trim differences compared to the more basic car. A very, very poor photograph, I'm afraid, but you know, it just kind of gives an idea of what photography was like in the 1930s. A two-door Ford Model Y there, the 8 horsepower car. Yeah, looks like a brand new tyre on the back, which is unusual. Quite often you see cars of this era with very, very bald tyres. Okay, a head-on view now of an E493A Prefect in South Africa. Windscreen open, so clearly a very warm day. I wonder what happened to this car. Another Ford Pop 103E here, and a very similar car parked alongside it, but in black. So what colour was this one here? Maybe it was a similar sort of fawn colour to the Anglia that we had until recently. The car on the left is a Rover P4. LUH 911 next, 3-bar grille on this car, and yeah, very, very nice too. And there's a Prefect alongside the 100E. So 2 Fords for the price of one in this particular photograph. Irish registered Ford Model Y here with a very dapper looking gentleman stood alongside it. I wonder what the dog's name was. There's another photograph of the same Model Y, complete with AA badge on the grille, on a very snowy day. Were they digging it out? I'm not quite sure, because there are wheel tracks ahead of the tyres, so maybe it had reversed into position. Looking at the screen, it's either steamed up or frozen up, I'm not quite sure which. Various Fords in this particular photo here. We've got a 7W10 on the left, or possibly a 7Y, I'm not quite sure, but if you look on the dashboard there's a vertical chrome strip which later Pops and things didn't have, so I'm thinking this is a 7W or a 7Y. There's a Model Y alongside it as well. And here another Irish registered car, and this is an E494A, but this is the Mark II, the earlier version of the E494A we saw a few moments ago, and this is the Mark II with a thicker strip along the top of the grille with Anglia written on it. The earlier car had an Anglia script in the middle of the radiator itself. Okay, now several photos here of a family with PWD 435, 1954 Ford Pop 103E on the left there, and a black example behind the people sat down, and there's an A35 there with a black boot lid as well. So many, many different cars visible in that particular photo, and another roadside picnic with PWD, and another example of a 103E in the background. So yeah, what a great scene, so much going on. Look at that roadside picnic, proper picnic basket and a little table there with a tablecloth on it, all very, very civilized. And another picnic stop, same car, same people, on a different occasion. Clearly this was a holiday trip. Look at all that stuff piled on the roof rack there. What a great shot that is. I was tempted to recreate that when we had our Anglia. There's PWD outside a very period looking 1950s caravan. I doubt that the little Pop towed the caravan to that position, so I'm guessing it's basically a static caravan. I see a sign for Clifton in the front window of the caravan. There it is again, at a seaside location there. Lady grabbing some rays in the sun, reaching for the cattle, and yeah, jolly times were being had. Various towels drying off in the sun as well. Back to slightly later Fords, and another example of the 300E Thames van. Very similar shape to the 100E Escort and Squire Estates, but different rear door arrangements. This was again taken in 1954 London, and we've got a Pop on the right hand side there and a Consul Mark one behind that, various other cars including a Riley, and in the distance a little example of the Ford 10 van, the little E83W van. JF8053, 2 photographs of this particular car now, a 2-door Model Y. That's a Leicester registration that ran from 1930 all the way through to 1935. This is a long rad car from about 1933. And just in the background there you can see another car and a little sort of pop-out caravan. There's another photo of these lads with the same car, location unknown sadly. And the lady here with their little Ford, a little 100E Ford Prefect. You can always tell a Prefect, like I say, with those different grills and the chromium headlamp surrounds. The Anglias and the Pops were painted, as if I remember correctly. Another 103E here. And that clearly looks like a bit of a holiday location. Is that an old railway carriage perhaps? There's like a railway signal just over on the right hand side there. So there's a bit of a railway theme going on there. Now we're in Rhodesia, now Zimbabwe, and we have here an E494A Ford Prefect and a gaggle of other cars of similar age in the background. There's an Austin Devon there, for example. Got some other Prefects, you can just see through the windows of this Prefect, and on the left a Hillman Minx. And a Model Y rounds out this collection of classic side valve Ford photographs, all original in period photographs, and again it looks like a picnic stop. Time for a quick cup of tea, and why not? And that wonderful old photo rounds out this collection of original photographs of the small side valve Fords of the 1930s through to the late 1950s. I hope that was of interest. There is also a collection of photographs of more recent sightings of side valve Fords elsewhere on the channel, so please check that out if you like your side valve Fords. And yeah, please have a look around if you're new to the channel, and there'll be many more videos along very soon. So bye for now.